Hello, my name is Diamond, aka Lady Leo. Welcome to my YouTube channel, or welcome back if you are a returning viewer. Now that the DCU is firmly in the process of being reset by James Gunn, I thought it might be fun to go back and really take an in-depth look at the DCEU movies that I was most excited for, that I was sorely disappointed by. And at the very top of that list has to be Wonder Woman 1984. This one had the misfortune of coming after one of my favorite DCEU films, which is the original Wonder Woman. It also had the misfortune of being dropped during the height of the pandemic, 2020, from my understanding. So essentially it was dropped on streaming and in theaters at the same time. Although that wouldn't have made the experience of what ended up being the movie better, but that's just what happened. But yeah, I wanted to rant about this movie for a long time. I think long before I revamped my channel 3 years ago, I had written out multiple scripts talking about this, but I don't know, maybe I never filmed it, or just I filmed it and I didn't like it. I don't remember. My point is, I've been trying to rant about this movie for a very long time, but today's the day. I spent a lot of time I spent a lot of time watching it, writing out a very thick script with, I didn't put page numbers, so I don't know how many pages, but a very thick script of all my grievances. We're gonna do this play-by-play style as we go through Wonder Woman 1984, because I'm kind of trying to decide whether or not I want to say that I hate this film. It's hard for me because I really love Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, but I hate this movie. I hate this movie so much, which is maybe I'm more disappointed in this movie than anything else. And sometimes being disappointed in something is way worse than hating it. Let's get into the play-by-play of Wonder Woman 1984. So this is the follow-up to the very successful Wonder Woman. It takes place in 1984. If I'm remembering correctly, the first movie takes place sometime in the 1940s, right at the end of World War I. It's somewhere in the 1940s. I don't remember. I think it was the end of the Second World War. So let's just say it ended in 1945. So it's been about 40 years since the events of the first film. Again, this is going to be a play-by-play style. This is going to be a rant. So this is going to be long. So we're going to strap in really quickly. If you don't mind, if you end up liking this video, please hit the subscribe button. It really helps me out and it doesn't cost you anything. I make videos with lots of different things. I make reactions, commentaries, am I the assholes, nail content. I like to mix it up based on whatever I'm feeling. So there's a lot of good stuff on my channel. So I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Okay, anyway, so this movie kicks off back in the past. We actually spend a hot 10 to 15 minutes. It's a pretty long intro with Diana and Themyscira doing what are those games that we have here? The ninja games, the warrior games. You know, those strong person game sort of relay. I can't think of it right now. It's some kind of relay style game that people go through with a series of tasks. That's what Diana's doing, but for the Amazons. So this goes on for some time. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually kind of one of my favorite parts of the film because I really love Themyscira, and it's just one of the better parts of the film, the way it's filmed. And it seems different than the rest of the film. So even though this intro to me is super unnecessary, since we already spent some time in Diana's childhood in the first film, I will not lie, I like it quite a bit. But we spend hot 10 or 15 minutes. We literally do this games for the whole span of the game. So it goes on for some time. And I guess the lesson here is to not cheat, not to take the short way around. I guess that's the lesson or the parable we're supposed to get from this intro. But eventually we flash to the future, aka 1984. What an interesting era to set this movie in. You know what I mean? Of all the eras I feel like Wonder Woman vibes with, it ain't this one. So it's just a very interesting era to decide to set the film in. We get what I can best describe is like a superhero saves the day montage. It's basically Diana going around the city, which is DC, by the way, Washington, DC, saving the day, preventing people from running people over in the street. And then there's a big mall scene. And then you have like Maxwell Lord doing a voiceover, who's played by Pedro Pascal. It's not really he's doing a commercial that they're playing as like a voiceover over all this. Okay, let me just say something. And if I'm wrong, tell me in the comments. I always kind of felt like there's different levels of heroes, right? Like you have people that, like Spider-Man, who is a little, well, maybe I shouldn't, I'm trying to think of like, I'm sorry. I like DC, but I usually like the villains more in DC, so I don't know who would be considered like a street level hero in the DCU. That's not true. I'm gonna go with Robin. Nightwing. Okay, so to me, Nightwing is always a little bit more like a street level hero, like a, you know, like a Gotham, which is basically New York City, you know, fighting crime, you know, daily. Whereas Wonder Woman strikes me as a little bit more global. I'm not saying it's beneath her to do these tasks. I'm just saying it just seems a little underuse of like Diana, like not beneath her, but like, you know what I mean? I don't know how to describe it without saying it's beneath her, but like she doesn't strike me as a street level hero. So the fact that she's doing all this during the day, okay. It also comes across as super cheesy, as a combination of the fact that they've gone with the 1980s and then just like the way the whole scene is framed out. And then I don't really understand how this works, but like Diana has got something going on like Sailor Moon, where like she has nothing covering her face and she's just not recognizable. You know what I mean? If you watch Sailor Moon, you know, Serena looks like Serena. The only difference is she's wearing her full Sailor Moon outfit, but like nobody recognizes Serena when she's not a Sailor Moon. There must be some kind of magic that comes with her and her full outfit, because nobody ever recognizes Diana. Anyway, so this montage is coming to its end where Diana stops a robbery of an antique dealer. I guess it's a jewelry store that has a side business dealing antiques, and some people decide to do a robbery in the middle of the day. Bold. And Diana stops it. It's so cheesy. It's actually not funny. And again, it's a combination of the era that this is set in, with just feeling a little okay, I'm gonna say beneath Diana. Just a little bit like Diana's like, you know, that's for the street level heroes. That's not something I would get involved in. It kind of reminds me of what she said to Batman. I think she would have said this in one of the Justice Leagues, where essentially she's like, I get involved when it's necessary, because he was basically being like, I've never heard of you. So to me, that's like, I get involved when it's world ending, but okay, I'm gonna let it go. Anyway, the save the hero montage is over. A side note, just a little bit of a side note. How does Diana know that all of this stuff is going down? It's the 1980s, so it's not like today where people would be out like filming their stuff with their phones, so you'd have access to it immediately. You know what I mean? Like maybe I'm reading too much into it, and my dad would say it's not germane to the story, but how does she know where all the crime is taking place? You know what I mean? Like, she doesn't strike me as the listen to police scanners type. And not only that, the situation in the mall was legitimately just happening. She just happened to be there. I don't know. It's probably just a situation where they want to set her up saving the day, but like, I don't know. It just causes me to have more questions. I'm like, how did you know to do that? How'd you know to be there, that it was going down? Maybe she was just in the mall already in her full outfit. I'm sorry. Anyway, moving along. So then we also get like a montage of Diana, like just a series of longing looks as she remembers Steve. It's been 40 years, girly. It is her first love, I guess, but I'm just saying it's been 40 years, Diana. No chance of moving on? Guess not. Anyway, she's looking for Steve everywhere. She's in the cafe, and I'm just like, okay, girlie, got it. You still miss Steve. Gotcha. Okay. Now, the very next day, Diana runs into Barbara. What's Barbara's last name? Barbara Minerva. Is that her last name? It is her last name. AKA Cheetah. So, Cheetah's played off as being like the typical bumbling scientist, drops her briefcase and nobody helps her because she's clumsy. She's definitely not ugly. She's wearing glasses, but she still looks like Kristen Wiig. So, I just... we're going for that trope. Also, take note of Cheetah's hair because that will be important as we go through. Sorry, I'm thinking about something later on down the line. Anyway, so Barbara tells Diana that she's a gemologist and Diana's I'm about to say archaeologist, but no. She's some kind of artifact specialist. It explains why she would be working in the same department as Barbara. Anywho. Sorry. And then after the wishing stone is introduced but not explained, we'll get more to the wishing stone as time goes on. Barbara and Diana go out for lunch. Nothing really of interest happens when they're having lunch. And then I think Barbara's walking home by herself on a street where there are literally no other people. Not on a street. She's walking like in that section that's designated as a walking path. Like people can't drive there. That's what I mean. Anyway, and she was helping out people, giving money to the homeless, showing how good of a person she is. And then this man comes out of nowhere, legitimately, and harasses her. And then Diana also comes out of nowhere to be like, go away, or whatever she does, pushes him off of her. Anyway, yeah, so that happens. I was of the impression that like when Barbara was walking to show how good she was and she was harassed by that man and then Diana saved the day. I thought she was going back to her house, but she goes back to the office to wish on the wishing stone. Okay. So she makes a wish on the wishing stone to be like Diana, which is probably my first thing that I hate about the stone. The stone doesn't seem to have any rules or regulations about it. And then we find out that there are some, but like, how does the stone know how to grant a wish like this, right? So like Barbara specifically says, I want to be like Diana. And she gives a couple of things to be smart, pretty, whatever else she said that she feels like Diana embodies. But, those are specific traits. But what the stone ends up doing for Barbara is a lot. So how does the stone know how to interpret somebody's wish if they wish for something that may have a couple of different interpretations? You know what I mean? Like her wishing to be like somebody else isn't as tangible as saying, I wish for an orange. Tangible orange. I wish to be like someone else. Do you want to be rich? You know what I mean? Because she names a bunch of traits. I don't know. It's just an interesting thing that I kept track of when I was watching the movie. Anyway, moving along. Very next morning, Barbara wakes up because she slept at work and the stone works immediately. People are paying more attention to Barbara. They're asking her how was her day and all sorts of stuff. And then she gets introduced to Maxwell Lord. And it's explained that he's some kind of investor or something. So he has special privileges to get a a behind the scenes tour of the library, not the library, behind the scenes tour of the museum, because they work at the Smithsonian, by the way, the Smithsonian in DC. So she gives him a tour of the museum, and while she's giving him a tour of the museum to Maxwell Lord, the two of them are just like chit-chatting, just like, ha, 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 ha. Diana comes up and like, what's going on? And he's like, hello, I'm Maxwell Lord. She's like, hello. And I feel like that's their first interaction there. But before we get into like the debauchery, Mr. Lord goes back to his Trump-style tower. It's this huge, what I assume to be like an office building, which is... it's nicely decorated. It's era appropriate, but it's decorated nicely, but it's unoccupied. So I don't know how he's paying for this building. The implication seems to be that he owns the whole building. But as far as I know, and as far as we find out, he not making no money. So I don't know. Maybe he got all the money for the investors. Anyway, so yeah, he walks up into his office building. He has a young son who's been waiting there for him. And then he also has an investor who's upset because Mr. Lord purchased a bunch of oil fields that ain't got no oil. So the investors are like, where our money is, where our money at? And he's like, no, you'll get your money. And I think the investor, let me see what he said. Let me remember. I don't know. Basically, they're just like, get me my money by tomorrow. I mean, you realize how unrealistic that is. My guy doesn't have your money today. He's not going to have it tomorrow from the oil fields that don't produce oil, but okay. Anyway, let's go back to Diana. So I'm assuming this has to be where Diana made her wish, although I swear to God, I watched the movie all the way through and I paused it so I could take my notes. I do not remember Diana ever specifically out loud wishing that she could have Steve back. She certainly did like hold up the stone and she looked at it. I don't know if we're supposed to interpret that to her to be her being like, I want Steve back in my mind, but she didn't outwardly make a wish on it. So I don't know if that's a rule of the stone. Can it grant a wish that you don't out loud say? I guess so, because Diana gets her wish later on. But anyway, she mind wishes on the stone, and then Barbara's over here learning how to walk in heels. I'm sorry. I'm going to get caught up on a lot of small things, but if I watch this movie and I wrote out this very long script, you're going to hear everything. The heels that Barbara is learning to walk in, they seem very high for the era. I don't know, because I was born in 89, so I didn't live within the 80s, but I don't remember seeing women wearing like basically stiletto platform heels in the 80s. I could be wrong, but they just don't look era appropriate, but she does look good in them. So there's that. Moving along to our next thing. So now it's time for like this red carpet soiree. It's basically, I guess, an investor meeting or something. Not a meeting, but like a party for people that donate money. I kind of guess that's the idea of it. And Diana's like, I don't usually go to these things, but Maxwell Lord convinces her during that time that they met. He's like, you gotta go. And she's like, fine, I'll go, or whatever. So she goes to this red carpet event, and this is where our story actually gets started, about 20 minutes into the movie. All right, here we go. Before we get into Diana and Steve, so Mr. Lord and Barbara, they go fool around in her office. He takes the stone behind his back, like she's not going to notice that missing. But anyway, he takes the stone, got what he wanted, and now it's time for us to go to Diana and Steve. So Diana's in this soiree, and a man comes up to her, a man who is not Chris Pine, and he's proclaiming that he knows her and all of this. And essentially what ends up happening is that Steve has come back, but he has come back in somebody's body. I have to fully reiterate how absolutely disturbing this is, because the movie goes out of its way to establish that this is physically someone else's body. Like, they show us here and they show us one other time, but they tell us that it's Steve, and then they make a point of showing Chris Pine for the rest of the movie. Now, the very first time that I saw this movie when it came out on streaming and I watched it, I thought, okay, maybe this is a limitation of the stone, right? Maybe the stone realizes there are some things that it cannot do, like bring somebody back from the dead. So I guess to the stone, it does the next best thing, which is, I'm going to bring back somebody in somebody else's body. But like, how do you grant a wish like that? How do you decide whose body he's going to inhabit? Also, what happens to that person's soul that Steve's body is inhabiting? Do they like frack off while Steve's there, or worse, are they there conscious but just not able to control their body, which would be horrifying. But this issue with like the movie going out of its way to establish that this is somebody else's body, which it really makes no sense considering that they're going to show Chris Pine for the legit rest of the movie. It just creates this problem that I cannot stop thinking about anytime that I see Chris Pine, because the movie wanted me to know that that wasn't actually Steve in his body. It's Steve in somebody else's body, but they're going to show you Steve the rest of the time. And this is just the weirdest choice. You could have just had Steve come back in his body, because we will figure out later on that the stone can grant any wish, no matter how non-tangible it is. So I don't understand why Steve can't come back in his body. It's just very, very disturbing to me. It's just the weirdest choice. Anyway, let's keep going before I get too upset. All right, so before Steve and Diana can use this man's poor body for adult things, Mr. Lord decides, because he's got the stone now, keep in mind, he's going to decide that he wants to be the wishing stone. Interesting choice. If I were him, I would just ask for an unlimited amount of money. Doesn't that fix your problem with your investors? You get money. Money can buy you power. Isn't that a lot simpler than asking to be the wishing stone itself, which is really dependent on what other people wish, which you cannot control? But that's just me. He decides he wants to be the wishing stone because I guess he wants the power more than the money. I would want the money more than the power, but what do I know? So he becomes the wishing stone itself, which will create a whole host of other problems. We go back to Diana and Steve. We're going to cut to Barbara very quickly. I'm pretty sure she's in the gym working out, realizing that she's a lot stronger than she used to be, and is not really freaked out about this. She's just like, oh my gosh, I can deadlift like 500 pounds with one hand. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. I'm not sure why we haven't learned this lesson. I would have thought that Spider-Man, the original Sam Raimi trilogy, as well as the Amazing Spider-Man trilogy, well, sorry, just the two films, would have taught us this. You cannot have more than one main villain in a superhero story unless you can do it well, which is not happening here. But they proceed to have two main villains. You have Maxwell Lord, and then you have Cheetah. My belief is that Cheetah is here because she's Wonder Woman's actual nemesis, but she's also a physical villain, right? So she's somebody that Wonder Woman can actually fight, whereas Maxwell Lord is just a regular guy. So he doesn't prevent any kind of physical opponent for Wonder Woman. But the problem is Cheetah is the better villain for Wonder Woman, and she's certainly the more interesting to me of the two. But you're splitting time between the two of them. And I just don't understand why somebody wrote this script and we're just like, you know what we need? We need two villains in here. No, pick one. You can introduce another villain if you want and then have them set up to be the third villain for the third film. But you can't have two separate villains in here. It just doesn't work. And again, like I said, Cheetah is the better villain. And she goes through 3 friggin' arcs in this film. And then you have Wonder Woman, and I love Pedro Pascal, but they could have got anybody. It didn't need to be Pedro Pascal, not that he doesn't add anything, but I'm just saying it could have been anybody. Anyway, moving along. Now it's time to pick up with Diana and Steve. Not Steve. Some Steve in someone else's body. So Steve and Diana proceed to use this stranger's body without any qualms. I cannot believe that neither one of them are concerned about this, about what happens to that person that Steve's body is inhabiting, and that Diana is just okay sleeping with him. It's very weird. It's very weird and disturbing. Anyway, cut back to Lord. He goes to the investor. So this is the previous investor who's like, I want my money by tomorrow. And he grabs the investor's hand, and I guess the investor wished whatever he was trying to encourage him to wish for. Essentially, he loses all his wealth and all his, properties or whatever. The problem, there's several problems that I have with this movie, but I feel like one of the biggest one is the movie's decision to have this magical MacGuffin, but for a good chunk of the movie, you don't understand how it works. You don't understand that later on, when you wish for something, it takes something from you. So this idea that he goes to somebody, he's like, what do you wish for? And I'll take this. It doesn't really make sense in general, but it certainly doesn't make sense at all until you understand what the rules are. And to be fair, I don't really think the script understands what the rules are, because even when they explain them, there's still some things that just inherently don't make sense. But they don't explain any of the rules of how the wishing stone works until you get much later in the movie. So you have Mr. Lord over here doing a bunch of things without us understanding, well, how does the stone even work? How many wishes do you get? How does it constitute what's a wish? What's the rule? Do they have to physically touch? You don't know, because the story's like, we got stuff to do. Anyway, so I guess he gets money and a bunch of people to work at his facility now. He's booming. Again, you could have just asked for money. I'm just saying, Mr. Lord, that is an easier thing. Get yourself some money and just ask for an unlimited amount of money. That's a lot easier than what he decided to do, but that's just me. Anyway, we're going back to Steve and Diana, maybe. I think so. Let me check my notes. Yes, so back with Steve and Diana, we got a little bit of a fish out of water montage with Steve trying on clothes from the 80s, going through the escalator and the metro. I guess they didn't have the metro in the 1940s. I don't know. I don't actually live in DC, so I don't know when the metro came about. But Steve's fascinated by it all. So Diana is the only one who's like concerned, like, how'd you come back? She's concerned about that, but like not using someone else's body. But anyway, so she takes Steve to her job, so the Smithsonian, so they can figure out how the stone works or what happened. And when she meets up with Barbara, Barbara's like, well, I gave the stone to Maxwell Lord. It didn't really seem like that happened. It seemed like he took the stone, but okay, she gave it to him. And so Diana and Steve now proceed to go to Maxwell Lord's office building. I don't know, the building where he works, so they can find him. I feel like the thing that's really funny about this is like, so after Maxwell Lord goes to the investor guy and basically gets, I don't know, his oil field struck money, whatever happened. I don't remember what happened in the exchange. Essentially, he got a lot of people to work in this office now, but like Steve and Diana are literally able to walk into this building, go up to his floor, into his office space immediately. Nobody stops them. Nobody's like, what are you doing? And they start poking through his office to figure out what he's doing or where he's going. So Diana realizes that within the stone itself, like there's like a band that goes around the stone that had writing on the outside. And then because he asked to become the stone, the band is the only thing that's left. And there's writing on the inside. So Diana realizes that the stone, or the language, is the language of the gods. So she thinks the stone was created by a god. So what happens next has to be like the most infuriating 5 to 10 minutes of this movie. I'm going to break the whole friggin' thing down. But essentially, they pick up a plane. I don't even know what it is because it couldn't be a plane ticket. He would need that to get on the plane. They pick up some kind of, let's just say it's a receipt, even though the way that it's structured looks like it's a receipt that would come directly from the airport. Like it looks like a plane ticket, but you could probably get a receipt that looks the same. But like my point is, it doesn't look like he printed it. It looks like he got it directly from the airport, and it doesn't make sense that he would go to the airport, buy a plane ticket, and then go back to his office with said ticket. But essentially, they figure out from this ticket in the trash that he's going to Cairo. Now, also in the trash is a magazine. And on the cover of that magazine is some kind of oil tycoon. And the two of them assume, without any evidence to back this up, that he's, not only is he going to Cairo, but he's going to Cairo specifically to meet this man. Okay. I'm not sure where they got that from. They don't have anything else to go off of, and he could be going to Cairo for anything. Even so, this the magazine article that they did not read, that they skimmed about this oil tycoon, I'm having a hard time believing it tells you his address. So they don't really know where Maxwell Lord is going to in Cairo. They just know that he's going to Cairo. So they're going to Cairo too. So let me break down what I find to be the absolute most infuriating scene in this whole movie. And that's saying a lot because there's a lot of scenes that are like that. But essentially, we're going to start from the beginning till they get to Cairo. Let's go through the whole friggin' thing. Diana says that they can't get on a plane because he doesn't have a passport. First off, she doesn't know this because this is not actually Steve. This is Steve in somebody else's body. So they could easily go back to this person's apartment, house, wherever he lives, and just double check and see if he has a passport. He could have one. She doesn't know that. She just assumes that he doesn't have a passport. Okay, so the next best thing is that Diana is going to use her badge to get into a hangar that the Smithsonian has on an airport, because Steve mentioned while they were talking about this that he wants to fly a plane. So Diana's like, well, we've got plenty of planes, so let's go to this hangar with the Smithsonian. Now, I'm having a hard time believing that the Smithsonian would have a hangar physically at the airport. I'm not saying that the Smithsonian wouldn't have a hangar. It makes sense that they would have a hangar where they keep things that go in and out of the museum, but why would they have one at an active airport, which is kind of what the movie is trying to insinuate. It just doesn't really make any sense to me, but okay. Diana's job and artifacts, I guess that gives her access to this particular hangar, but she ain't gonna be able to work there no more because they're gonna know that she badged into this location to steal a plane, but okay. I guess she's not thinking that far ahead. Anyway, let's keep going. So they walk through the whole hangar and there's a series of planes like outside of the hangar that are like on the actual tarmac, not on the runway, but on the tarmac. They pick what is a 2-seater plane. Now, keeping in line with my original thinking, there's no way that something that is going to be displayed in a museum would be physically sitting on the runway, gassed up, ready to go. I just have a hard time believing that things that go in and out of the museum would not be disabled. You know what I mean? In the sense that like, some of these things get hung from the ceiling. So I imagine to make them lighter, they would get rid of some of the mechanical elements, which you wouldn't be able to see if you hang a plane from the ceiling. I'm just saying that I just don't feel like any of these things would be functional because they're going to be in a museum. Like, why would they need to be flight ready? You know what I mean? And I think that would prevent issues. Not only do they pick a 2-seater jet that is flight ready, it's fueled, ready to go. Okay. Let's move along to the ridiculousness. I'm calling bullshit that Steve can fly this plane. First off, Steve died in the 1940s. It's 1984, so it's been a hot 40 years. It's been a very, very long time since Steve was alive. Aviation has come a long way. As soon as they get in the jet, they do like a very quick shot of Steve like pushing buttons, but I don't believe he would even know what half of these buttons are because there are dozens of them. And aviation was so different when Steve was a pilot. I'm not saying that he couldn't sit here for like a few hours and try to understand what some of these buttons do, but there's no way in hell he understands enough to be able to like start this plane and fly it without any issues. But okay, Steve takes him like a hot 20 seconds. He pushes some buttons. He's like, let's fly. Okay. Now, because this is because this is an airport, they have a tower, but it doesn't seem to be an active airport. You know what I mean? Because there's no planes that are landing and or taking off, but there are people in the tower. So, okay, I don't really know where this airport is supposed to be. It certainly can't be one of the major, I think there's 3 major airports in DC because those airports are busy. I suppose it could be on a military base, but again, that would create its own set of problems. So I don't have any idea like where this airport is actually situated, but there's no planes that are actually landing and taking off. The 2 of them get in the plane. Steve's got everything ready. They're on the runway. They're gearing up to take off. Diana decides it's a good time to tell him about radar now. And he's like, are they going to be able to see us? She's like, yeah, they can see us anywhere. Okay, so it's now it's time for Diana to talk about this skill that she's been working on because her father Zeus cloaked the island of Themyscira, and she's like, I've been trying to make it work, but I haven't been able to get it, but she's gonna get it here and now. I don't know why Diana would be working on this skill unless she's talking about cloaking herself, but she's able to get it working and running. She's able to get the skill completed right in the nick of time. There's several problems with this. First of all, if I understand radar, and I'm not a pilot, but I do love aviation, so I watch a lot of videos about aviation. My understanding of radar is that the whole function of it is to be seen when you're not physically visible. So it's not just for the tower to see you, it's for other planes to see you and for you to see other planes. So it has more than one function, and it has nothing to do with direct visibility. I suppose it's possible they could turn off their transponder, but as I just mentioned, like radar helps you stay away from other planes in the air. So that would be pretty dangerous for you and all the other planes you might kill because you don't know they're up there. But anyway, so Diana's able to cloak the plane just as it's taking off. And they disappear from radar. Pfft, whatever. Another thing too is like the this is really small, but the tower, says they see the plane, but they don't make any attempt to get a hold of the plane. They just send a bunch of people out to the active runway where a plane is taking off. Would never happen like that, by the way. They would definitely try to get a hold of the plane, and they wouldn't be sending out, cars on the active runway. Anyway, my point is, so the two of them take off in this plane that Steve definitely can't fly. They're now cloaked, so they're invisible, dangerously flying around. Hope they don't kill anybody. And they decide to fly through some shrapnel. Sorry, I mean fireworks, because it's the 4th of July, which I imagine would be akin to shrapnel, but it's a very smooth ride for the two of them. Keep in mind, this entire scene exists just so that they can have the invisible jet. But look how many convoluted things have to happen to make this possible. And this is like one of the biggest problems that I have with this movie. There's a lot of moments that I know that they pulled directly from the comics, but they don't really make sense in the context of the story being told. But it just feels like, well, this is what people who read comic books like. They want to see this. I mean, if you can do it in a way that makes sense with the story that you're being told, cool. But like, I just don't think most people who read comic books are like, you know what? I want to see this exact cover as represented in this. Or, you know what I mean? Like, how many people are checking for the invisible jet in a Wonder Woman film? It's something you can't see technically. So like, again, if you can work it in there in a way that makes sense, cool. But if not, I won't die if it's not there. But this whole scene is for the invisible jet. Keep in mind, this is a jet. This is a 2-seater jet. They're flying from Washington, D.C. to Cairo, which is a minimum of 11 hours. And that's if it's a nonstop flight. There ain't no way in hell they're making it across the Atlantic in this little jet without having to refuel multiple times, because it's a jet. It's designed for speed. It's not designed for distance. So I don't know, maybe Diana got out and flew or pushed them. Who knows? But they somehow make it to Cairo. Who knows where they landed? They make it to Cairo, and before they make it to Cairo, let's go back to Mr. Lord. Oh, sorry. Before we go back to Mr. Lord, I forgot. We got to snap back to Barbara, because having two villains is giving me whiplash. So we snap back to Barbara because Diana tasked her with finding out where the stone was originated from before she left. Did she? I'm pretty sure she did. I wrote it down in my notes. So yeah, she tried to figure out where the stone came from. She accomplished that. And she decides, it's a good moment to go for a run right after doing that. She runs into that guy that harassed her before. She harasses him. This is really just to focus on the second part of her transformation. So as I mentioned, Barbara goes through 3 transformations in this film, which also changes her hair each time. Like, her hair starts out as like a strawberry dirty blonde, I don't know, and it's like curly, and it's like right here. And then in the second phase, which is the phase that we're entering now, it's kind of getting into like a beach wavy territory, dirty blonde. It's also longer, so it's like here. And then she'll go through a 3rd transformation, which we'll get to later. So this is just to establish we're in the 2nd phase of Cheetah's transformation. Now, going back to Mr. Lord in Cairo, he did meet up with that oil tycoon who was on the magazine, by the way. And essentially, I guess he wanted his oil from him. I'm so confused because he didn't. Okay, so Mr. Lord purchased oil fields that didn't have oil. He wished to become the wishing stone. And then he took his investor's property, which did strike oil, but he still wants oil from this guy. I don't know. The guy's like, I'm not selling my oil. No, he said he already sold his oil to somebody else. And before that, Mr. Lord asks him what he wants. And this is kind of what I mean about the wishing stone being able to grant very non-tangible things. He says he wants his land back, and he wants the refugees or all the people that aren't supposed to be there to be kicked out. And Maxwell Lord's like, granted. And just, again, how do you even grant something like that? It's a very, very loose translation of a wish. Not even that. Like, again, how do you even quantify? What does that even mean? But essentially, after the guy wishes for something, Maxwell Lord's like, well, I'll take all your security staff with me. And then there's these walls that come out of nowhere around the country, or maybe around the city, and then people who are in the city get kicked out. I guess that's how the wishing stone interprets that wish. So Maxwell Lord and the security staff that he stole are on the stole. They're on the move. They're on the move to their next location. Now it's time for our big fight scene, because we haven't had one of those in a minute, actually. Somehow, Diana and Steve, not only do they manage to catch up to Maxwell Lord, which is hilarious because, again, it takes 11 hours minimum, nonstop flight to get to Cairo. So and giving Maxwell Lord the benefit of the doubt, let's just say he had a 6-hour head start. Not even sure how they managed to get there in enough time. They didn't know where that guy was living, so they passed Maxwell Lord like just on a general street. They're going in this direction, and then Maxwell Lord's people are going in this direction. It's such bullshit and not believable. We get a fight scene because, again, like I said, it's been a long time since we had one of those. This is a good time to point out that outside of the fight scene in Themyscira in the beginning, that's the best fight scene there is. Sorry, it's not really a fight scene. That's the best action scene. The rest of the fight scenes in the movie are just not good, which is really sad because I'm not sure how we downgraded, because I know they got more money for this movie, but like the fight scenes are just bad. I don't know how to describe them any other way. Like, any of the running that Diana does is just horrible. And the first fight scene with her fighting Maxwell Lord's goons, it's a lot of her running and jumping and stuff. But like, the running is bad because it's very clear that she's running on some kind of treadmill or something like that. But it's also like in the movie itself that she's actually floating above the ground. Like, she's running on this treadmill, but she's not actually making any contact with the ground. And it's bad. It's terrible. It's really bad. And it's so distracting because, like I said, this fight scene in particular with her and Maxwell, well, it's really her and Maxwell Lord's goons. It's really mostly her running and jumping. Okay, but during this scene is where Diana, she learns that Maxwell Lord actually absorbed the wishing stone. And it's also kind of where she realizes that she's starting to become physically weaker because a bullet hits her and she just, couldn't hold on to the rope as well when she was trying to save somebody. So she's realizing there's some more stuff going on with the stone. So this is when the movie starts to kind of try to realize that it needs to really explain like how the stone works. And the best way to do that is to have somebody else do it. So essentially Diana and Steve call Barbara and they're like, hey, we need to meet up because we need to figure out what's going on with this stone. They immediately find someone who has knowledge of this magical MacGuffin, and he has a whole book of knowledge of the MacGuffin, and they go to wherever he is. I assume this is still DC. Don't know how they got back, but it's not germane to the story. They realize, or Diana realizes, that the stone was created by the god of lies. So it grants your wish, but it takes your most valuable, not possession, but whatever you value the most, it takes. Kind of something that's important to know ahead of time before you make a wish, but okay. The only way to reverse the process is to renounce your wish. Again, these are things that are actually really important to understand. And later on, we find out that the stone only allows you to grant one wish. I don't know how they know that without the magical MacGuffin telling them that. And I don't know what Maxwell Lord gets out of other people wishing things. I remember him explaining it, but maybe it's in my script for later on. Anyway, keeping along, they realize that this is not a good thing. The wishing stone now being Maxwell Lord is not good for his health. So moving along with our story. Mr. Lord is on a mission to grant as many wishes as possible, and Steve tries to convince Diana to renounce her wish, aka give him up, but she absolutely refuses to do that. And she prepares to go into battle without her powers, because she's like, I'm not giving you up, Steve. It's the only thing I wanted for all this time. In between this conversation that she's having with Steve, she takes a little minute to explain to him this golden armor that she has. So She said when she came to Earth, she looked for Astoria, who is the great warrior that stayed behind to allow the Amazons to escape, but all she found was her golden armor, and that's why she has the golden armor, which will come into place later on, which I will get to later on when it comes back into place. Moving along. Now on to our second fight. So Maxwell Lord, sorry, I keep going back and forth between calling him that and just Mr. Lord. So anyway, Mr. Lord has weaseled his way into the president's, to get an audience with the president's. I don't remember how he did that, but essentially he got an audience with the president, and this is where we get our second fight. Cheetah's fully in her second transformation for this fight. Diana's she's a lot more physically weak during this fight. This is probably my best fight outside of like the original action scene in the beginning. So yeah, the two of them have a fight, and Diana kind of loses. Well, she definitely loses. And Barbara's like, "You're not taking this away from me." And she decides to go over there with Maxwell Lord. The movie is implying that Diana lost her humanity. Barbara, that Barbara lost her humanity. I'm just saying, Diana, you only met the chick for a couple of times. How do you know she was a good person to begin with? Maybe that's how she appeared on the surface, but I'm just saying she could have been trash. Anyway, moving along. Basically forces Diana to give him up. They have a very heartfelt conversation where she gives up Steve, walks away from him, and she's kind of focusing on him talking to her about how to fly. And this is the middle of the day, by the way. Diana flies off. Sorry. You get more of that horrible running, but like above the ground, as Diana flies off into the day. The presumption is that she's going to where Maxwell Lord and Cheetah are going to, which I think they're going to some base with a bunch of satellites, TV cameras, something or other. That's where they're headed. I don't know how Diana knows that's where they're going, but the presumption is that that's where she's going. Anyway, she spends some time in the air learning how to fly, and it's time for us to get into our big bad final because I'm getting tired. So during this thing as well, like they have Diana riding the lightning, but it's like in the middle of nowhere. It's in between these two scenes. It doesn't make any sense. And it feels like it's just like a trailer shot, because essentially we see Diana learning to fly, and then we go back to like Cheetah and Lord having a conversation. And then we go to Diana riding the lightning. Again, the implication is that she is on her way to the fight, but essentially she has to go back home for that heavy ass gold armor. This is what doesn't make sense for me. And this is like where like a change in the script could have made like a really big deal. Now, Diana has already relinquished her wish of Steve. So at this point in time, she's no longer physically weakened. She has her powers back. If I'm Diana, I'm not wearing that heavy ass constricting gold armor to go into battle if I'm physically fine. You know what I mean? I think it would have been a lot better, and I think it would have made a lot more sense if Diana had refused to give up her wish. She would have gone back to get that gold armor because she would have needed it, being physically weaker. And then like later on, when Diana's giving this big speech about like, you know, giving up her or what she wants and to everybody else, she could say, you know, I'll be the example and I'll give up what I want. To me, I think it would have played out a lot better, but the way that it plays out, it just doesn't make any sense for Diana to go back and get that armor. But that's what she does. She goes back and she gets that heavy ass armor so she can go into battle. Anyway, we're getting to the end of this slog fest. So let's go into the final battle, which is sort of split into two parts. Her fight with Cheetah and her fight with Maxwell Lord. Let's kick it off with her fight with Cheetah. It's kind of like dusk. It's not like fully dark outside, but it's definitely dark. Sorry, I'm preparing mentally. So we get to see Cheetah in her final form, her final transformation. Sorry, we see Cheetah in her final form. Let me just sorry, before we see Cheetah in her final form, Mr. Lord starts broadcasting, I guess, essentially telling people to wish for whatever they want. They explain this in a way that, like, it seems like the wishing stone does require that people physically touch the stone, or in this case, Maxwell Lord. But Mr. Lord found out about these satellites which drip particles. I don't know. They're explaining it in a way that they think this makes it so that people don't have to physically touch Maxwell Lord to grant their wish. It sounds like bullshit to me, but okay. He's making a broadcast to all these people telling them, wish for whatever you want. And then somehow that goes back to him. I don't know. Anyway, cut back to Diana and Cheetah. We see Cheetah in her final form. And just like I can't control myself here, the very first time I saw this movie, I was not prepared. Cheetah had been going through transformations throughout the whole thing, so I was like, oh my god, what's Cheetah gonna look like? I know who Cheetah is as a character, so I really know what she looks like from the comics and from like the animated movies, because DC's got a lot of those. So when I tell you this is the laziest, it looks so bad. So what they've chosen to do, because they only show Cheetah in close-up twice in this version of her. They've chosen to cover her whole body in fur like she is in the comics, but they've decided that they're not going to go past the neck. So from the neck up, they're doing it with makeup, and it's not even good makeup, it's lazy makeup. And there's such a juxtaposition between her face and the rest of her body that it is so incredibly jarring that, like, when they show it for the very first time, which is like Diana's over here and Cheetah's on this ledge, they like zoom in so you can see it from afar, and then they like zoom in so you can see her face. Atrocious, terrible, awful. And then on top of that, Cheetah's hair also changes like each time she has a transformation. So the last time we saw her hair, it was like dirty blonde and it was like beach wavy. Now it's kind of almost like bone straight, and it's more of like an ice blonde, which further is juxtaposing. Because normally, like, Cheetah's hair in the comics, I think it's usually like a tawny sort of color, like a tawny brown. Anyway, it looks god-awful. It looks absolutely terrible. And this fight between Diana and Cheetah is something I just genuinely don't give a fudge about. I don't care about it at all. It's sort of, like I said, it's dusk. It's not like fully dark outside, but it's also not like brightly lit. And then it's just shot terribly. It just looks bad. I don't care about this fight between Cheetah and Diana. I just want this movie to end. So, I don't know. Diana wins. She doesn't kill Cheetah. I think the implication was that she did kill Cheetah, but we find out later on she didn't. She goes in there to confront Maxwell Lord, and for some reason there's like a wind tunnel going on, even though he's inside and he's just talking to like some broadcast cameras, but there's some weird wind tunnel going on. And essentially, Diana straps the lasso of Hestia, the lasso around his leg, and they can't physically see her, but like a gold light comes on the TV and she makes this big speech to everybody else, like basically give up your wish because of all the chaos that it's causing. Again, I just think it would have been thematically a lot better if Diana had decided to be the example and give up Steve. It would have given her a natural reason to need the gold armor, and it would have made a lot of sense plot-wise. Anyway, she talks to the people, they renounce their wish, and it's over. So yeah, we're good. And then we get sort of like a post-credits, or maybe just like before the credits scene. Essentially, you have Diana having a conversation, just a very small conversation, with the person whose body she used, who was not Steve. Again, that's just further strange. And then we get this post-credit scene with Linda Carter, who is Asteria, which I thought was kind of cool. But that's Wonder Woman 1984. Again, I really loved the first Wonder Woman film, and that's somebody who kind of usually, I don't get too excited about DCEU films because they're pretty inconsistent, so I don't allow myself to be like excited about a lot of them, but some of them I am. Some of them I'm like, I see the trailer and I'm like, okay, or like they have one that follows it and I'm like, okay, like Shazam. Didn't really go in there with much of an expectation. I love the first Shazam. I don't hate the second one, but I certainly don't like it. Same thing with Aquaman. Love the first Aquaman. don't really like the second one. We couldn't get a second Man of Steel, you know what I mean? But anyway, yeah. So for me, I just feel like very disappointed in this movie because of how much I loved the first one, and I absolutely hate this one as it relates to the first one. It's just not something I would ever go back and watch. There's nothing about this movie that I like outside of Gal Gadot. And that's it. I love Chris Pine, but the whole situation with how they brought him back is just disturbing to me, and I can't help but think about it when I watch this movie, knowing that that's not actually Steve's body. So it's just a weird choice to me. Here's to hoping the new DCEU with James Gunn will be better in terms of cohesion and consistency. I hope so, but honestly, don't know if you can change Warner Brothers, and honestly, Warner Brothers is one of the biggest problems, but we'll see. I am excited for Superman. I did love Henry Cavill as Superman before, so he's no longer Superman, obviously. But I did like the trailer for the new Superman, so I'm excited. But I did actually like the casting, you know what I mean? Like, DC did a pretty good job with casting for their characters. They're just not very good at, like, consistency. So, you know, we'll see what happens. But that was my very long breakdown rant of Wonder Woman 1984. I think I might talk about The Flash next, because The Flash is one of those ones I was excited for, even though it took me a long time to warm up to Ezra Miller. And that's because I was very attached, well, I still am, to Grant Gustin as the Flash. So maybe I'll talk about The Flash next, or some of the other movies that I'm disappointed in. Maybe I'll do more breakdown rants. Anyway, let me know what you thought of this movie in the comments below, and what is your favorite movies that you love to hate from the DCU. DCEU. They should have just called it the DCU. DC Universe. Yeah, I don't know why they called it the DCEU. Extended universe? I mean, isn't extended an implication? It doesn't matter. Anyway, that's my time. Like, comment, subscribe. Bye.